Nature Breakthroughs with Dr. Wild Ben Goldman. Conversations with changemakers in a world gone mad. To discover what you need for personal, organizational, and societal change, get your free download of 3 ancient rituals smart entrepreneurs use to bounce back from shifts in the market and inside themselves. Go to www.naturebreakthroughs.com.
Yes, you pull them till they bite down. On the lies that you built from my doubts. I don't want money, I don't want cars, I just wanna be free.
So hello, John Christian.
My friends call me Kit.
Kit?
Kit, my professional name or my legal name is John Christian Javert.
John Christian.
So Christian's my middle name, and so I go by John Christian a lot.
When I was getting ready to talk to you, I remembered, which I'm sure I've told you this, that I know your sister and your mother. Have I told you this?
Yeah, that's how we, well, when we first met, we met through Melissa,
Right.
And then you had said that you had worked with my mother and you
Yeah.
knew my sister. And I actually told her that we were working together. And she's like, Ben has done some amazing things for people. And so she had nothing but really good things to say. And she said that you were the person that helped her get the artwork on a big, huge billboard, I think in the middle of a city somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, your mother came to me. She's a digital artist, right? Or an artist? How does she describe herself?
Well, right now she's doing like AI artwork. So,
Artificial intelligence artwork.
Yeah, she's doing. She draws pictures, pencil pictures of the AI, and now she's working on actually designing AI experiences. So she's interviewing the robots, and now turning it into where you can go in and actually talk to the AI in AI, as opposed to AI talking to us externally.
Well, I mean, back in the day, they would call that a digital artist. I don't know what they call it now, but I remember she came to me. I don't remember how I first met her, but she came to me with this crazy idea of using the Jumbotron on the side of the Prudential Center, which, is generally used for advertisement, and also for promotion of the events inside the Prudential Center. And she said, she wanted to put some of her digital artwork on there. And, this was when I was running City Without Walls. And it sounded like a wacky but interesting idea. And I guess I was the executive director there for about 6 years. And I think about halfway through, I figured out how to make it happen, which was not easy. It required strategic partnerships with the Prudential Center, with the New Jersey Devils, the hockey team that plays there, with the Prudential Foundation. I mean, and then there were several other like corporate sponsors and stuff. And they, and we got the program funded and approved because we turned it into a mentoring program for inner city kids. So we paired, we called it Newark New Media, and we paired digital artists with kids, training them in digital technologies as well as creativity. And their joint works, the works of both the students and the master digital artists, went on that screen. And your mother Claire was the inspiration for the whole thing, and and she was one of the artists who participated. But I think it ran for several years, and dozens of artists and many dozens, well, not dozens of artists, but over a dozen artists, I don't remember how many, and many dozens of students actually had their work shown. And the north, what is it called? The Northeast Corridor of Amtrak, and all the trains, the New Jersey Transit trains, So it's like millions of people pass by that Jumbotron. So millions of people saw these students' artwork and these digital artists. Anyway, so that was kind of cool. And then your sister was also involved, and I met your sister completely independently through, I think actually at a foundation thing, and she was involved with also with technology, but I think with nonprofit technology, right?
Yeah, she's been involved in a lot of nonprofit. She got into like website design and marketing a little bit inside of her career, like communications and websites. So she's been working for nonprofits for a while. Yeah.
I think I met her completely independently through some kind of in some kind of a program with the Dodge Foundation, another major institutional funder in Jersey. So anyway, and then I met in a completely different way. And the only reason that I figured out the connection was that you told me your last name of Jervert. So there's a big aside, but that's how we
were destined. We were destined to cross paths at one point or another. You know, I don't know. Maybe you got this pull to the Jervert family.
I don't know. We need a reunion. So tell me about, so thank you for being on my podcast, which you know is about change in its many forms. And, most of our work together and how I know you is through Zerkers. So what is that?
Well, Zerkers really is all about change. And it really started for me at a point where I knew that I needed to change my mindset in order to lead my kids better. You lead by example. So the evolution of that and what Zerkers is and what it's become came from me starting my career pretty early on. So I was dating my wife back in 1996, and we were dating, and I asked her to marry me, and then 3 months later we found out she was pregnant. So we actually pushed up the wedding, and she's like, you should probably find a job that's going to pay the bills and support the kids. And I've always been this like really adventurous, outdoorsy type person, and I'm like, oh man, I got to start providing for a family. And I went from, going to school to having a baby, being married very quickly. So I got into, that survival mode that most of us do when we start making decisions based on what we think we need to do in order to support ourselves or our families. And I wound up getting in the banking industry. So I was a financial advisor and worked in problem resolution for a little while in a cubicle for about a year. I thought I was going to die. But I learned a lot. And then I eventually worked for JP Morgan Chase and PNC as a business banker. And I always liked connecting with people and helping people, inside of building and planning for their future. So that piece was aligned. But, I was sitting at my desk one day, and this is after my daughter said, "Hey, Dad, you love what you do." And I couldn't honestly look her in the eyes and tell her I did. So I wasn't connected. I wasn't connected with what I was designed to do on this earth. And it felt horrible. I wasn't in the best shape. I wasn't mentally feeling right, and I needed a change. So sometimes change comes with a conscious choice. You're moving towards something, or sometimes change comes from unconscious choice or away from something. So I knew I needed a change to get away from that career and find the thing that lit me up inside, so I could show my daughter, not just tell her to follow her passion, but actually show her that it's possible, and not give up. And there's some history to that too. My dad worked in New York, worked on the World Trade Center and commuted. So he wasn't really around in my life. And, so I wanted to be there for my daughter and show her that you didn't need to sacrifice, your family or time to, to survive and pay your bills. And so that's kind of led me on a journey. So at that moment, I was a top sales producer at the time, and this wasn't really fulfilled, and my sales dropped, and I eventually left the banking industry. And then what happened was pretty amazing. And talk about change. Once you click that piece of you on, I accomplished more in 1 year than I had in the past 10 years of my life. So I had all these dreams in high school of traveling and taking adventures. And so, I got up the courage to ask my childhood mentor, a guy who was the #1 surfer in the world at one point, to mentor me. And he was #1 surfer, surfed 60-foot waves. And I've always been a guy that has been a little bit more reclusive, a little more shy. And I had this fear about getting out there and telling people my message or stepping into something that was a little bit outside my comfort zone. So I spent a week with him, and he showed me how to overcome my fear inside of surfing bigger waves. And we didn't surf huge waves, but there was a mindset shift inside of working with him, and that applied to my life. So I started knocking off all these bucket list items like skydiving and bungee jumping and running endurance races and all the things that I put off, completely changing me through the process and building up my field resilience. And that led me to backpacking 3/4 of the coast of Costa Rica, surfing with crocodiles. And I got to this longest left-hand break in the world. And I heard this voice within and without, and it said, "Well done, now go tell the world." The sun was setting and the waves were breaking over my feet. And I always knew from a young age that I had this calling to serve others, and with whatever unique gift that I had. And I started stepping into that, making that change from a scarcity mindset to knowing that, you put your heart and soul into everything, and you can achieve things that you thought once were impossible. So I came back and I started facilitating adventure challenge trips. So having people write their own obituary and jumping out of an airplane, or going whitewater rafting and talking about flow state. So I was just experimenting at the time, and I was doing, marketing consulting and business consulting and helping businesses make millions of dollars. So I was wearing board shorts to work. I had my business on the side, and I was like, man, this is really cool, but this isn't 100% it. I was 5 minutes from the beach. And so I had to take another leap of faith. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was actually doing coaching and learning development. So I found my way to one of the largest coaching schools in the country, and I helped them with their marketing, and also became a certified professional coach with over 350 hours of certification. And I'm energy leadership master practitioner. So then I started getting pulled into this consciousness phase of my life. So what is consciousness, and becoming very conscious and understanding what I did in that time period that I didn't really understand through the experiences. Through that change. So understanding like what was the mechanics behind that change, and how now can I bring others through that experience. And so Zerkers kind of grew and evolved in that process to where now it's a combination of like, what is the essence of it? And the essences of it is connection, connection to yourself, connection to others. And that all stems from consciousness. Once you're conscious, you can begin making changes in your life.
Let me, I want to back up just a second. So, after you decided you needed to make money for your family, then you ended up, then you took, I don't quite, then you went surfing and disappeared for a while. Is that what happened? And your family.
The first 10 years, yeah. So the first 10 years was, hey, I got to make money for my family, support the family. So sacrificing myself as my dad did, working in a career that he wasn't fully aligned with, and where he wasn't happy.
Okay.
Well, I wasn't fully fulfilled in my
then
career.
You were able to set things up over the 10 years so that you could take a break from that? And
well, after 10 years, I blew out my 401k, all the money that I had saved in my 401k in order to make that happen. So I took 2 years and all my life savings to travel, to learn from some of the top people in the world. Going to Costa Rica, California, I've learned from guys that have grown businesses to 7 companies to $1 billion. Network with some of the top internet marketers in the country, learn from the best in the world. I just spent a good probably 2 years really pushing my personal mental and physical limits, not only mentally, like going through programs and education, but also physically putting myself in situations that most people don't feel comfortable doing. Because I believe that if you're going to coach somebody through something, you want to be able to do that yourself or move through it yourself, so that you can relate. So I've gone through many situations, so I can bring others through that with skill. Bring others to that with skill, not just kind of like hypothetically, like, do this and that. Like no, like I can relate, and I've been through this.
And presumably your family supported you through that major.
Well, here's the thing. Yeah, my wife is an angel, and she's supported me 1,000% through that transition, where she's worked in jobs where she has health benefits to give me the freedom to grow a business that is a very intangible business. Communicating what it is to do coaching is a very, and I was in sales for a number of years, so it was very challenging making that leap from a tangible product to an intangible product. And with the kind of mindset that I have, or the mind that I have, big picture, we're distilling that down to where people understand it and connect with it, and knowing that we're actually working with people and giving them an experience than telling them about what they do was a big shift. But, I remember a conversation I had with my wife, and I'm at the point where I'm like, well, yeah, what do we really want? Like, maybe we go live in Costa Rica. And I was surprised, because she kept on saying yes to these things that I'm like, no, she's not going to say yes to this. Like, there's no way, but all right, I'll ask. So that's how I said, I'm going to go to Costa Rica. What do you think? And see if we can maybe start a life down there. And she's like, well, yeah, go for it. And so I spent 4 months down there living there, and, gotten into some pretty crazy situations with, some details around that is I met a guy that's bipolar manic depressant down in Costa Rica the first day. And we ended up trying to start a school, and him bringing in people that were homeless, a guy that was in San Quentin for murder and heroin dealing, and people that were homeless into the place we were staying. And I actually found a note that said, I don't know whether to kill or to steal. So there's very dangerous situations that I got into down there. But it pushed me again to my limits. And I did learn that, maybe Costa Rica wasn't the best place for my family at that time.
They didn't come down. You were scouting.
I was scouting, yeah, and seeing if I could make that work. But we decided to stay in the States for a little bit while longer and let the kids go to school here. But what came out of that experience was I met a professor down there that was actually turned out that he was a scam artist. But he connected with and apparently consulted for some high-level people in the world. But he was also connected to the mafia, I found out later. And so he contacted a professor.
The same bipolar guy or someone different?
No, this is another guy. This is another guy that he brought into the loop.
You had a whole cadre of...
You could make a movie out of it. But a year later, he contacted me and said, hey, I'm partnered up with this professor in Colorado. I want you to come down and with Zerkers run the adventure piece of the study abroad program, a humanitarian engineering program. So I did all the logistics and got everybody together for the trip. And so the professor brought 12 students down. And so we went into the community and we did we worked on the community garden the first year. Actually, that was the second year. And then the first year we did a solar powered hot water heater as a project. But as we were traveling through Costa Rica, we take the kids zip lining or surfing. So we combined this experiential learning with service to the community. And then, the first trip was not a disaster, but the professor, who was a scam artist, just wanted to get down to Costa Rica so he could fix his car. And so I brought my family down on that trip, and we went to the hotel. I did the surfing excursion. And then he turns to me, he goes, well, there's not enough rooms in the hotel that we reserved. And I'm like, well, I have my whole family. I luckily had a friend down in Costa Rica and we wound up sleeping on the floor of their house. There was people coming in and out of the house, you know, and we found out later that he was dealing. And so I had my kids and my wife in the house, and the other professor was basically like, well, hey, we'll figure it out. So he came back and picked me up, and I slept on a couch, and my family slept in the bed. So we figured it out. So I really learned about resilience and teamwork. And the students actually wound up chasing the one professor out of, because he was taking money. We wasn't skimming money. He was skimming off the top, having them sleep in the houses of his friends, and giving them, like, you know, a piece of a chicken for dinner as opposed to spending the money on a dinner. So I really learned, not in the school that we were supposed to go down to, the land was actually owned by the mafia. So when the other professor went to do the class on the land that we were supposed to go to, a guy came out with a shotgun and said, you know, you come on this land and there's going to be problems. So that was my first experience of the international retreat. So I learned a lot in my you know, in that process. Second year, we went back down there, and it was flawless. It was absolutely amazing. I teamed up with the professor that was legit, that actually worked on the Mars lander. And he's very well renowned professor at Colorado. And it was just an amazing experience. But I think as entrepreneurs and individuals, you know, if we're just playing it safe, you don't have to get to have those enriching experiences, you know? So that's what I help people do, is overcome the fear to do the things that they're afraid of, and then help them through that situation so that they feel confident going through that.
And then another question I had from what you were saying in the beginning was, you said you do energy, or you're licensed in some kind of an energy thing.
Yeah.
And that always, whenever I hear that word, I don't know what people are talking about exactly.
Yeah.
Is that some kind of UFO thing, or is there some way to describe what you're talking about that?
Yeah. So the idea is that, you know, we're all made of some sort of energy, right? So we're resonating at a certain frequency, and based on how we're resonating energetically, that kind of determines our levels of consciousness. And there's some research that has been done on it, you know, kind of incorporates Claire Graves' work, spiral dynamics, and Bruce D. Snyder developed this energy leadership model, in which there's the energetic self-perception chart. So what I've done is kind of combined all this research on consciousness, energy leadership, spiral dynamics, flow state, and some quantum physics and things like that, to develop this style of work that I do with clients. So if you look at consciousness, generally speaking, is seven levels of consciousness. And so you have the lowest levels.
Can I just stop you for a second? Just to bring it down further, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we all know that we can have low energy or like high energy throughout the course of the day, right? So that's also what you're talking about, right?
Sort of, but you could have a very angry person, like a level 2 level of consciousness, with a lot of energy. But there's two different types of energy. There's anabolic and there's catabolic. Catabolic is destructive energy, and anabolic is constructive energy. So it's not necessarily whether somebody's feeling like they have a lot of energy, it's the type of energy that they're resonating with.
So there's good energy and bad energy?
Well, it depends on what level of consciousness that you're operating from. So if you're operating at a high level of consciousness, there is, like, say, a level 7, there is no good or bad. So that's also how people see the world, also can dictate what level of consciousness. Like, you can talk to somebody and have conversations, and generally speaking, understand what level of consciousness that they're operating from.
So at the low level, is there any good energy? or is it
Mm,
there's a lot of bad energy at the lower level, a lot of good and then is that what you're saying?
give you an example. So if we look at just like the lowest level of energy, say that's just like level 1, right? And this is the human way of describing something that is potentially undescribable. So it's an interpretation through one person's vision of what consciousness is, right? So it's a framework for us to play in. I think the truth, people know the truth, but it's very hard to articulate. So this is just a way to articulate a certain level of beingness, which is very difficult to articulate fully. So we take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, right? So level 1 would be somebody that is feeling as if they're a victim or things are happening to them and they have no control over their life or their situation. And they might go into lethargy or depression. So if you see somebody that's having difficulty getting out of bed, they're not motivated, they are making excuses about, why they are where they are, that would be indication that they may be resonating as a level 1, which is, kind of destructive because, the mind dictates on a cellular level the health of your body a lot of times. So that's kind of deteriorating the body faster than at a higher resonating energy. And so if we move up from there, and that's a lot about ego, no faith, mindset. So that would be like a level 1 person. And I'm sure you've kind of met some people like that.
Yeah, I sleep with them often.
Of course, yeah. Well, that's the thing. Everybody's got little pieces of this in them, and you can shift in any situation. So it's a fluid thing. So nobody's just like at one level at one point in time. It's like each second, each interaction with the world and others like shifts things around, and it's just being conscious of like, oh yeah, like I'm shifting into like this victim mode. Maybe my energy is shifting down to level 1. How do I shift back? So the trick is the awareness, the consciousness around how you're operating. And now you have the power of choice to say, okay, I'm going to operate a little bit differently. So another nuance to this model is that you can't necessarily see answers anything above where you're resonating at. So like a level 1 person can't see like a level 7 thought process, creative thinking. And so they're blind to it. So that's another nuance to the model. And then
whereas from the higher level, you can see the lower.
You can see all of them. Yeah. And then you get to choose. So it's like, well, I'm going to choose to get angry. I'm going to choose anger, like, cause that's going to serve, a positive outcome potentially, So then level 2 is somebody that
anger gets a bad rap.
It does, and I fought anger a lot. Like I was one of those guys that's like, you know what? I'm not an angry guy. There's no anger in me. Like I'm and then I'm walking by my kids' toys and I'm like, that's making me angry. I'm like, why is it making me angry? And so when you push it away, right? You want to push away that piece of you. But when I started embracing it and loving that piece of me and understanding that, that anger can protect my family, it can get me out of bad situations as long as, I'm not letting it consume me. But, there's a piece where that anger does serve or it's present, so getting that out and not internalizing it is important, understanding like, well, why is this making me angry? Does it make sense that it's making me angry? So now you can look at anger at a different perspective as opposed to, what, I'm just angry. And, it's all about, I win, you lose, right? Mentality.
And, righteous anger is the cause of much of the greatest social changes that we've seen in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, there can be a love-filled anger.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah.
In fact, even at low levels, the anger is often saturated with love. Just look at, if you it's hard, at the lowest level, it's not that there's no love involved. It's just that it's all misplaced and but all the kind of horrible stuff that goes on with domestic violence, it's all among, well, people that otherwise are supposed to be, are,
Hmm.
are loving each other.
Exactly. So imagine the entire world had this information now and then could choose differently. What would that look like? So if we jump up a little bit, that it's powerful. So if we jump up a little bit and we start bringing awareness and we make all the, talk to all the angry people and say, hey, look, there's a choice. You don't necessarily have to operate like this. Or the person that's stuck in bed and be like, hey, let's look at how you're operating in the world and shift your consciousness. We go into,
Which could include channeling the anger, for example, as opposed to shaming it or bottling it
of
up
course,
or denying. Yeah.
yeah.
And I don't mean to be just I keep bringing it back to the anger, but it's
Yeah.
I think that's I think this brings it down to earth when you talk about this energy stuff, because
Oh yeah.
people feel anger.
Uh-huh.
It's usually that's one way that a lot of people get in contact initially with their own energy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You get frustrated. You get to a point where it's like, man, this is not right. I want to change. So it's part of change, right? It's the awareness. It's the feelings, and you're like, I don't like this feeling. I don't like this. I want to change this. So how do I change it? And there's a whole bunch of different tools. Consciousness is just one tool to shift that or reposition it.
That's where you were going before I interrupted you with the energy. Well, you were saying you do something conscious potential. Where were you going before I stopped you?
Well, so we'll go through some the energetic levels and bring it full circle. But so like if you're looking at the next level of energetic operation, it'd be like a level 3 type person. And now level 3 is starting to take responsibility for their actions and starting to get into a more anabolic energy, creative, positive energy. But a level 3 person is someone that might rationalize their situation, make excuses and kind of has an avoidance mindset to a certain extent. So they rationalize their situation like this is happening because of X, Y, and Z. So there's not a full acceptance of the things that are going on, but they're starting to see and be more conscious of their operation in the world. So that's level 3. And then you jump up to level 4, which is somebody that might be in, I'd say you call them like a helper, where they're going out and they're burning themselves out to serve others in the process of their lives. So, mothers have a lot of high level 3 or 4 energy, a lot of times consciousness, where it's all about the group and at the sacrifice of their own well-being. Even a lot of coaches go into their practice and they want to serve, but they're not very good at receiving. So these people have opportunity to learn how to receive in the world. And a lot of people in social work and all those different, so depending on what a career that someone is drawn in, a career that's going to drain them and not fulfill them, which is why I think a lot of the problem with people, 80% of the world's population not being fulfilled with their careers is because of lack of consciousness of what they're kind of, where they're operating. And I think if we can bring more consciousness to people in their careers, they can make more informed decisions with where they want to go, which is exactly what happened to me. So then you look at level 5. So level 5 is people that are they're very energetic, very entrepreneurial. They're very focused on opportunity. So a lot of opportunists are in this level 5 energy, and it can be overwhelming. And a lot of those individuals have a lot of different ideas, but aren't very organized or structured in it. So a lot of entrepreneurs fall into this level 5 achievement mentality, kind of warrior mentality. And that you can do for only so much before you get burnt out in that process. So you find a lot of people operating at a level 5 consciousness that they're a little bit burnt out. They may be overworking. They might have troubles with their marriage or relationship because they're imbalanced. Maybe their business is successful and their relationships fall apart. Or maybe they're focused more on the relationships and their business fall apart, or their career. So shifting once they, so successful level 5 entrepreneurs then go shift into a lot of times this level 6. And that's about peace and joy and connection to like ancient wisdom. And that's a lot of, you know, this, the information that you're sharing with the world is this ancient wisdom and seeking and shamanism and all of these other different things that, you know, is missing in society, you know? So they go seeking for this because they haven't found it in any other areas of their life. And they might sell their businesses. They may go into reclusion, or they might, you know, go to the beach and a good friend of mine says, you know, sell beads on the beach, right? And just kind of unplug and do all the yoga stuff, but they're not really attached to the reason for existence, the reason they were put on this earth, you know. And I'm very spiritual. I believe in God, and I'm a Christian. But I believe that that's one piece of a larger definition of God, you know. But I think that spirit that's in all of us, the consciousness, there's a reason why we were put on this earth. And I think each person has unique abilities, unique skills, and something inside them that they were designed to work on in this lifetime. So when you take and you go to level 7, which is pure creation and passion and just full connection to not only yourself, all of yourself, where you're not segmenting pieces of yourself and pushing them away, like we talked about parts integration, like reintegrating yourself, where you're loving yourself fully, you're expressing yourself fully, and you're also connected to that consciousness that I call God, and other people call other things, but you're connected to this, where life isn't just about you or spirit. It's this flow that you step into, and the things that you were designed uniquely to do, you begin to manifest in the world. And that's a lifelong path, and I've been on that path for about 10 years now, and there's always more to learn, you know. And in that process of learning all these different skills and talents and consciousness, I've developed my own style of communicating, bringing other people through that, which is conscious human performance and true connection. So, you know, I've learned that my unique gift is connection, and truly connecting people to that mission, connecting people to consciousness, connecting people to other people in their relationships, their career, or even their body and their health. So that's kind of been the evolution of the work that I've been doing in the world.
Can you give us an example of like a change that you feel proud about, that you've helped a person or organization through using this approach?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So the biggest change personally for me is that I can look my daughter in the eye and tell her honestly that I love what I do. You know, so it's speaking the truth, and really that's the biggest thing for me, and the biggest inspiration for me personally is living my truth, you know, and especially for my kids and my daughter. That was the biggest change for me, is not just talking about it, but actually embodying being it, you know, which was huge, you know. That's stepping into your full beingness, personally. And then for some of the clients, you know, it's different for each one. You know, some clients, like say a high level 5 individual that I was working with, you know, hadn't slept for 3 days straight, wasn't being valued at work, was in a very toxic corporate environment, you know, had a little bit of a turmoil in their childhood. And it was all affecting, you know, their progression in their career. And they were just going through every single day, stressed out, anxiety, you know, their health was suffering. So after working with them and bringing awareness to the levels where they're operating from, you can now look at situations and say, go through the day and rewind it and be like, okay, so here's a situation, an interaction in which I reacted with anger, or I went into recluse, and really take a step back and be like, okay, so, you know, how would you want to operate differently? You know, if you were operating from this higher level of consciousness, your higher self, how would they operate? And then you have the answers already, because you're now becoming the observer of your own life. And then you can pick apart little pieces of it. And it's like, well, I would have taken a break and I would have kind of gone to the gym and did a workout, or I would have given my wife a kiss goodnight, or I would have did this, I would have did that. And then it's like, okay, so imagine doing that day over, as if that's the way you did it. And now next day, let's try it again. And you keep on refining and doing that and doing that. And then in that process, that's the human performance piece. So that's why I call it conscious human performance. It's because you're increasing your human performance by being hyper aware of the way you're operating, as at the same time pushing and challenging yourself outside your comfort zone by doing some things. For me, it was a lot physical. Sometimes people, I use physical environments to shift them. But sometimes maybe they just need to, go to the bar and talk to a stranger. So people have different levels of outside their comfort zone. And the truth is you really only need to push yourself 4% out of your comfort zone to make some sort of shift or change in your life.
And can you, where would you can you assign these levels, these energetic levels, to like countries or like the world?
You can assign it to companies for sure, based on the leadership. So a lot of times, and networks. So a lot of times a company will have a leader with, a toxic level 2 operating in the world. And you can tell that that company has a very toxic environment. So what happens is that toxic environment, level 2 company, now attracts other level 2 people, where they like attracts like, right? So you can definitely see it in companies. And then people that get pulled into those companies that might not be at that energetic level are feeling, very bad. It's just a mismatch, and that's where unfulfillment comes in. Countries, you could apply it to countries like Costa Rica is one of the happiest places on earth based on their studies. And it's because I believe that the country is resonating at higher energetic levels. The people are more connected to the communities, there, and more connected to each other. And I think that ultimately, if you didn't use the word consciousness, it comes down to connection. So they really have a strong sense of community and connection. And so I believe that the countries with the most connectivity, compassion, and love, those are the ones that are resonating at high energetic levels.
Yeah. Are there companies that you see as operating at higher levels?
Which companies would be energetically resonating?
Or is there like an average level that most companies are operating at?
Most are at like a level 5. A lot of companies in the world.
Which is the achievement oriented.
Yeah, achievement orientated. Yep.
So there's some that have gone above that.
Yeah, I think the companies now that are integrating like the social good inside of their missions are now starting to resonate at higher energetic levels. So it's becoming more about the whole as opposed to the part. So like a lot of companies are set up to manage the bottom line. Sales and production and it doesn't matter, we'll burn our people out to get to the goal. And then there's other companies that are like, well, how does our operation benefit all of humanity in the process of creating profits and jobs in the world? So those are the companies that are starting to resonate at higher energetic levels. Those companies that are shifting the consciousness of the entire planet through their operations.
So here to get very grandiose, what do you think it needs to happen to cause that kind of shift to scale, more in a broader way in the world?
Yeah, well, what my vision is to revolutionize the education system, number one, and then revolutionize the I'd say coaching and learning development industries. So I think if that we can put together programs inside of the school systems that are teaching students young about some of these skills that were not taught in school. Like, I don't think I've ever had a consciousness class in school as part of the curriculum, grade school, high school, college, unless you have like some weird attraction to it. I'm sure there might be some courses in college now that do that.
What would you teach in a consciousness class?
Well, it'd be, I'd say,
these levels, you mean? Or
you could teach the levels. You could teach people alignment inside of what their unique gifts are, connection to themselves. Like, when you get out of high school or college, you have no idea what you really want to do a lot of times, you know, like there's no direction. So if you could give students these classes that bring them through, I'd say 3 different stages. So you would teach the consciousness piece, which is connection, right? So you got consciousness and understanding, awareness of how you're operating in any given level, like would be one. The second one would be the connection piece. It's like, how do we learn how to network and connect? You know, finding jobs. Networking is another huge skill inside of connection. Contribution would be another one. So how are you contributing based on your unique talents and abilities? You know, what were you designed for on this planet? And then the third is commitment. So the commitment to your health and well-being, you know, so the way I imagine that curriculum would be a four-step process inside of that college or high school curriculum. And then the same thing applies to organizations. So you go into these organizations and teach them, or bring awareness around where they're operating at, and what's happening as a result inside their organization, and then building the company to maximize the potential that they have to impact the planet with their services and their messages, thereby increasing the consciousness of the planet.
You're kind of like teaching like a system. And it reminds me a lot of the Enneagram, like what you're talking about. And that they also have these levels and stuff, but they blow it out horizontally as well as vertically, so that there's different types of people at these different types of levels, and so that there's like kind of unique attributes at each level, depending on the person. And the higher you go, the more integrated things become, so that you have more and more of the. Yeah, there's also, you know, they're ancient, obviously, even though the spiral dynamics. You're saying Schneider was influenced by Graves?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure for certain, but a lot of the work, you know, kind of mirrors that Clare Graves work.
So that's obviously very contemporary, but there's also, of course, ancient paths of enlightenment that talk about these kinds of levels.
Yeah, it mirrors the chakras too. I mean,
chakras is an example, but those are not necessarily seen as like cardinal or ordinal, you know, like one's better than the other.
Yeah, and you know, because you've done the research, that, you know, you overlap all these different ways of. It's just different people have different lenses and they articulate it different ways in the world, you know, so you just overlap all those to find the truth in that, you know.
Here's another way of talking about it, which is, and I like this because it's a little more dynamic. Well, there's some dynamism to it. So at the lowest level, you know, another person, of course, that's very influential with this stuff is Ken Wilber. Do you know Ken Wilber?
No, I don't think I know him.
You would really love Ken Wilber. You need to look into him. He's like Joe Integral. So he's got systems for everything. In fact, what's his famous thing? You know, he's basically a theory of everything person. And all his stuff has these levels. And it's very the whole spiral dynamic stuff is is very integrated into his work. But so this kind of relates to him, but where you would, at the lowest level, you would have your habitual self-concept, like who you think you are, or who you take yourself to be, right? And then at the second level, there's your actual behavior. And then at the third level, there are your internal attitudes and motivations. And, you can become aware of these. This is about consciousness. You're, at the lowest level of consciousness, it's like your habitual self-concept. And then you're at a high, you've achieved a higher level of consciousness when you become aware of what your actual behavior is, which may or may not correspond to what you think, who you think you are, right? And then with more work, you can begin to become aware of your internal attitudes and motivations, which is a little deeper. And then, so then in this tradition, which is Gurdjieffian, there's a shock point to get above that. Like you don't just progress you don't just get a certificate. You have to go through an ordeal or some kind of a shock. You have to go to Costa Rica with your family and encounter drug lords,
Yeah.
And then the next level is you become aware of your underlying tensions and affects. I mean, this is a level of presence where you're beginning to catch yourself in the act. And then at level 5 is a level where you become aware of this is more emotional, of your rage and your shame and your fear and your terror. And these, as adults at any rate, we usually have very deeply repressed those, so they're not obvious to us. And your passions and your raw instincts. And that, I think, in a way, is maybe also the territory you're talking about of finding out like your purpose, right? And then, and this, by the way, I'm getting from Russ Hudson, who's and Jessica Dibb, who are kind of, well-known Enneagram teachers. Then at the 6th level, which they call God's waiting room, is when grief and remorse and ego deficiency finally kick in, where you begin to break out of your ego, and then comes the next shock point, which is more of a surrender. And at the 7th level, and this also relates to, do you know the 7 or the 10 ox in the Buddhist tradition?
I haven't studied Buddhism yet, no.
The 10 bulls. Well, this is the 8th bull, but it's the 7th level in this system, which they call the void or no thing. Where you become aware of, like, that we're mostly nothing, and that there, or that there is no thing. It's kind of like an unveiling, or right?
Yeah.
And it's a moment of kind of realization. And then at the 8th level, you talked about your wife being an angel. This is the level of angels and saints, which is the true impersonal being. And I'm not, this is where this is where it starts getting above me. I mean, I can kind of feel like where I am on this ladder, and like, why is it impersonal? Maybe, I don't know. Well, I guess because it's like an angel and a saint is not, I don't know exactly. But then the 9th level, they call the Godhead, and it's the true personal being. Like, why the personal being would be above the impersonal being, I'm not entirely sure. But
well, personal being, if that would be the way I would interpret it, is all one being, so maybe it's that oneness.
Yeah, but that would seem more impersonal. But anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
So this kind of systems that you're talking about, that, and this is this would be more of an ancient understanding of it, of the kind of thing you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
There are ancient schools or mystery schools that
Mm-hmm.
would teach people how to move up the ladder,
Yep.
and I do think that the rite of passage work that I offer is all about that. It's about how you make these transitions.
Mm-hmm.
But I need to, I'm not necessarily aware of what level I'm on, and with me, I don't know about you, but you have one kid or
Two.
two? I thought you had two. You kept mentioning your daughter. You have a son too, right? Or
My son, yep.
yeah.
Yep.
For me as a parent, I could only remember. I only knew like the age. I only understood the age that my kids were at any given time. You know what I mean? Like I completely forgot what they were like when they were younger, and I had no idea what they would be like when they're older. And that's kind of how I feel about these levels of consciousness, is that the level that you're at. But I mean, you can intellectually probably understand the other levels, but and you might even think you're at a higher level, because you can conceptually understand the level,
Yep.
but you only know the level where you're at, and you're conceiving of the other levels through the level that you're at.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why you need somebody there to help guide you, because it accelerates the process. Having that external, just, hey, did you know that you said like I need this, or the language patterns, and you can see people's energy. Like when you interact, we've developed a very acute ability for protection, right? To instantly size somebody up, figure out what their energy is, what they're saying, underlying what they're saying. So that's very difficult to do for yourself. So I think that that's why it's important for people to engage with information, but also the experience, and experience it through a connection with another human being. I think that is the key for a lot of these systems to be taught or educated through experiential interactions with individuals. That's why I love the adventure piece, getting people outside of their normal environment, giving them the information, but now like experiencing it with other human beings. I think that's the key to accelerating the evolution of the planet and consciousness.
So as a master coach, are you still being coached?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I have multiple coaches, multiple levels. Yeah. And even me, I've been through different stages, and you were talking about the ego. Yeah. I remember when I had awareness around my ego and almost felt like it was dying, and I went through a mourning period. Like I felt like, really weird when that happened, but it was really just this evolution of seeing your ego from a different perspective, so it doesn't really die. But, and having people around me that have, maybe 10 years ahead or 5 years ahead of the process, you can go and you can say, hey, look, I'm going through this, I'm trying to make sense of it. And for me, I do a lot of processing, in my mind. And I talk about things that I am doing in order to understand them, and then also feel them through my body. So yeah, I have coaches, and part of the thing for me is I've searched around the country for some of the top people in the world that have been through a lot of these transitions and teach, and so that's all part of it too, because you have people that might be developing content and information from one level of consciousness, and it might feel complete, but really there's much more to it. So that's another challenge in the industry, is that you have people that are prevalent, that are operating at lower levels, and then perpetuating this information at a certain level, which is also a challenge in itself. So yeah, I think we all do our best where we're at, and I think it really comes down to intention. And if you can tap into as close to the truth, because I think everybody knows underlying all this information is some type of information source from wherever, and we're just trying to bring that source from wherever it's come from through our mind or body or heart. And then that becomes our work. So I think that whatever created us, the information that we're designed off of is just trying to articulate itself. And the way it articulates itself is through human beings that have all these different layers based on their experiences growing up and their neural pathways and their genetics and all this other stuff. So my goal in my lifetime is just to get down to the purest form of what that message is and what that source is trying to give to generations of individuals and humans. And I think with each evolution, we get closer and closer and closer to that message.
And what does the word Zerkers mean? Where's that come from?
Zerkers actually means underground warriors for the people. So the way Zerkers came about is I started a company called Business Berserkers, right?
Berserker.
So I was always really into Zakk Wylde, who calls his fans berserkers. And I'm like, yeah, I love his work ethic and I love the Viking, kind of lore. And I love the idea of this warrior, mentality initially of a warrior, right, to overcome all challenges. And so I call it Business Berserkers because I had that business consulting background and just captured that side of me, the berserk side. And then I was a big mentor of mine and person I followed for a long time is Onyx Silver, and he had talked about creating a tribe. And so, what are the people that engage with Zerkers as a company and with me? And it's like, well, they're Zerkers. They're people that are overcoming all challenges. They're really looking at themselves and stepping into what they were designed to do in this world. So, it's a tribe. It's a group of people coming together to evolve the consciousness of the planet with their unique abilities and skills. So that's kind of how Zerkers evolved and where that came from.
So what kind of people do you work with?
A lot of entrepreneurs. There's a lot of entrepreneurs who we work with. I'd say mostly entrepreneurs at this point.
And how do they get in touch with you if they're curious?
Zerkers.com, Zerkers.com. And on the website, you can see some of the videos that of some of the adventures that I've taken over the years. And then there's actually, if people are interested in joining the Underground Warriors group, there's an application to apply. And if you're up to something absolutely amazing in the world and have something in your heart that you want to get out and you're looking for a tribe of people that are there to support you, then those are the people that we want to get in touch with and bring into the community.
So if they go to Zerkers.com, they can figure that out.
Yep.
Cool. Well, thank you, John.
That's my pleasure, man.
Appreciate you talking to me, and here's to the higher consciousness.
That's right.
Thanks for listening to the Nature Breakthroughs podcast with Dr. Wild Ben Goldman to discover what you need for personal, organizational, and societal change. Get your free download of 3 ancient rituals smart entrepreneurs use to bounce back from shifts in the market and inside themselves. Go to www.naturebreakthroughs.com.